Greetings from the Idiot Box, where we explore the good, the bad, and the wacky. I'm Allison Lips. Chris D'Angelo is joining us today. Chris is a student in the Television Studies Master's program at Rowan University. He's a television, pop culture, and comedy enthusiast. Hi, Chris. How you doing?
Hey Allison, I'm doing great. It's great to be here with you.
And why did you decide you wanted to talk about Conan? I know we're both huge fans. I see your shirt. Oh, that's one of the Funko Pop ones.
It is. Yes. Yeah, so I mean when you reached out and invited me on, I was trying to think of where some of that excuse me, where some of that overlap would be.
Yeah.
And I know it seemed like comedy was a big overlap, and then
Yes.
Conity.
Conady.
Conan.
Yes.
It might have just coined a new word
Yes.
for Conan comedy, but Conan, I think, at least for the majority of my adult life and a little bit into my
Mm-hmm.
adolescence, I think has been synonymous with my love of comedy and I think
Yeah.
television as well. So it seemed like a natural fit, and the fact that this special aired recently, it actually gave me the rejuvenated love of Conan by watching it. So as far
Yeah.
as something or someone to talk about for an hour, it seemed like a perfect fit.
The special was way more in depth with the old stuff than I was expecting. We know that given Conan's tumultuous relationship with NBC, a lot of the old stuff has not been seen in a very long time unless you go look at YouTube videos that were uploaded. Questionably, there are a few legitimately uploaded ones, but seeing the Interrupter return, the FedEx Pope, we have seen Triumph and the Masturbating Bear, but those are probably lower tier characters for me because they are so juvenile.
Yeah, juvenile's a funny word because as I was watching it, I realized I discovered Conan as a practically a juvenile, but an
Yeah,
adolescent.
yeah.
Um, and that juvenile humor is a through line throughout. I think a lot of his, especially the early work. But
Mm-hmm.
to your point, it was interesting trying to see how much was still available, how much was is still, I guess, legally online, and maybe just still hidden throughout YouTube. The
Yeah.
Conan channel has a good amount of Conan classics, which is nice.
Yes.
So there are a good amount of the remotes, but I do find that the sketches from late night are a lot harder to find when you're looking for those specific, characters or random one-off things. So yeah, I appreciated in the special how much they kind of covered the breadth of his career, and gave a lot of love to the late night stuff as well.
It was very heavy on his early career, which surprised me. Like the podcast was mentioned, but it wasn't really focused on TBS. Obviously, was mentioned, but it was a lot of late night, which that is the show that has my heart. So I was very happy about that, even though pleasantly surprised. And they started with who was the first one to come out?
John Mulaney came on first, and
Thank
I
you,
think
Bill.
I think
Bill Burr was second, and for some reason he was coming to mind, and I knew that was not right. Thank you.
yeah, John Mulaney was first, and I thought he gave a great perspective of that. I mean, he's, I guess, 42 now, so the elder
Yeah.
elder millennial kind of cusp of Gen X. Those folks who were introduced to him in high school or middle school, but early in their life, and kind of went on that long journey with him. So a lot of Mulaney's remarks really resonated, uh,
Yes.
especially his talk of being, not that I was even I went back and traced my fandom, and I
Mm-hmm.
found it was probably around 2002 when they started airing the previous night's episode on Comedy Central at like
Okay.
7 p.m. That's when I probably started watching the most.
Yeah.
Definitely was familiar with him, and I think there was overlap with my love of SNL and you know the occasional over when those worlds would collide on his show, being aware of that.
Yes.
But when Mulaney was talking about being 12 years old and knowing that he's on 13-week contracts, I thought that was really funny because at a certain point, I found that I knew way too much about Conan's early
Yes.
career and the behind the scenes, and then obviously later and with the Tonight Show drama being probably more invested than most as far as talk show host contracts and whatnot.
And what was weird is I also related to John Mulaney saying like there shouldn't be this much stress for a child when it comes to Conan O'Brien. Like we have like chained ourselves
Uh,
to the tree
yeah,
of
yeah, that
Conan
was.
O'Brien's career, and it's stressful. And I was probably around 10 when I discovered Conan because I would stay up late to watch The Tonight Show. My dad would talk about Johnny Carson hosting The Tonight Show, so naturally I'm like, I'm curious about The Tonight Show. Jay Leno and Johnny Carson are very different people, but a 9-year old does not know that.
Yeah.
And I would stay up, see commercials for Conan, and naturally, it's later, so let's see how late we can stay up. And I started watching that. And then when Conan was on during the day, I would start watching that. After my parents sort of were like, yeah, you can watch this. Which, now, like in hindsight, as I've gotten older, I realized like going from watching tons of Nickelodeon to watching Conan O'Brien is not that big of a stretch.
No, no. Did you have some all that in there? I feel like Nickelodeon
Yeah,
at a period of
probably.
time there was a lot of they did a good job of giving you the younger version of what
Yeah,
what adults were watching anyway.
right. We still have Keenan around
Uh,
doing sketch
e-
comedy.
exactly.
That was what I was doing at that age. And then
Yeah.
at the 10th anniversary special was probably when I found out because the internet wasn't what it was at that time, is now at that time. So I decided to watch the 10th anniversary special. Then I got that DVD, and that was the first time I found out about the first 3 years.
Mhm.
When Mr. T comes out with a 7 on a chain, and Conan's like, I've been on 10 years. And he's like, well, you weren't funny for the first three. Or you've only been funny
Uh,
for the 7 of them, which tends
that's
to
it's funny.
be
That's
the
the
consensus.
the running joke. I think Nikki Glazer made a similar
Yeah.
joke at it during
Yeah.
the Twain special. But it is funny. I went back and I rewatched the first episode, which is on YouTube,
Yes. Legally.
and, and that was a really interesting watch. Like just seeing the nervous twitches that Conan had. He
Yes.
was touching his sleeve a lot, and he had like a nervous
Yes.
laugh that he has eventually gotten rid of, but it was very prevalent
Yes.
during that episode. But then I jumped to his interview with David Letterman the
Yeah.
following season,
Yeah.
and even just in that, there was a huge difference as far as his comfort level in that interview. And it's funny, then David Letterman, that's the famous clip they showed in the 10 excuse me, in the 10-year special. Dave Letterman references it, but he basically asks him like, how did you get this show? Did you basically yeah, it's what would you do with a talk show? I came in fourth. And David Letterman's
Yes.
like, yeah, that was the moment that sealed it for me. But in his remarks during that interview, I felt like Letterman really went out of his way to celebrate and recognize the type of comedy they were doing, even in that first year. I think like having the respect of Letterman within a year of the show is a type of validation that probably helped get them through those 3 years where they were really figuring it out and probably less commercially successful than they had hoped to be at that point.
Yeah, David Letterman was a huge supporter early on, and that definitely helped. There were other appearances of Letterman briefly on late night. You mentioned that first episode. It is an awkward watch, and for some reason, John Goodman and George Wendt are leg wrestling in the middle of the show.
Yeah, it's bizarre. And
Yes.
then I enjoyed. I feel like Conan always has an interesting dynamic around attractive women. So having Drew Barrymore as a guest was funny because I think he was a less confident person then. Like, his confidence I think has helped navigate those interviews and make them more
True,
entertaining
and
over the years.
this would have been before Letterman's birthday present.
Yes, definitely before that. Um, but I really, as a whole, though, I did enjoy the episode. I thought the Tony Randall interview was maybe actually like my favorite part. I thought that was like the advice he was giving actually seemed really sincere to him. I think he said like it didn't sound. He's like, I don't think he completely got everything that Conan was going for, but
Oh,
he
Tony
was
Randall,
so.
absolutely not.
But
Tony,
he said stick by your artistic conscience and do what amuses you. And I think over the course of his career, you could sum up that's exactly what Conan has been able to do. So I'm glad I watched the whole thing and got to that point. I enjoyed that.
my favorite part of the first episode is the opening. That's just a classic opening.
Yeah.
The
Uh,
better be as good as Letterman.
mm, yeah. That walking it all the way up to standing with a noose around his neck. I mean, that is not something
Yeah.
I think anyone was expecting to see. Um, and I think
But
he did a great job of just addressing that question head on in a way that really it seems like only Conan could.
right, it's the combination of silly and dark, and I don't think people realize how dark Conan's humor can get. You see that a bit with Jordan Schlansky because the amount of ways he wants to murder Jordan Schlansky is pretty graphic.
Yeah, and I think he enjoys like playing in the darkness. Like I
Yes.
think he likes the twisted darker humor. I think he gets a real kick out of that, and I think he enjoys people's reaction to it too. Like I think he definitely feeds off people, and I think that's another recurring theme of Conan and kind of what makes him
Yeah.
the best at what he does. As far as anyone can interview someone, but I think he feeds off those spontaneous, unplanned things better than just about anybody. And I think that also is why the remotes work so well, and a travel show can work so well for him, uh,
Yes.
because of the way he can feed off folks.
And the travel shows, while he did visit other places like Ireland and Germany prior to Finland, Finland is really the origin of all of this. And that goes for pretty far back. It's all because he sort of looked like Tarja
The
Hallinan.
Yeah, I was trying to think. I wonder what year that was that first got introduced as a bit, but that was definitely sustained over a long period of time and had a heck of a payoff that was able to really parlay into
I think I was in
something
high
pretty awesome.
school at that
Okay,
time. Yeah, that bit was.
yeah,
And
that was definitely early, early like mid 2000s. So they were running with that for a while. It's that the yeah her and then Tilda Swinton are really
Swinton.
the two ladies that Conan.
Right, he wants Tilda Swinton to play him in
Yeah,
his biopic.
exactly.
And she's totally down with it.
Oh,
She has
100%.
confirmed that, yeah. And then with the special. So we were talking about John Mulaney.
Yeah, Mulaney. I thought Mulaney first was great. And I think gave a great fit like that fan perspective, and also the first person that referenced him on that special as like his comedy hero. And I think that
Yes.
like with a certain generation, not just through the night during the special, but I think anyone who listens to his podcast, not that Conan really loves the adoration,
No,
but
he
I feel
doesn't.
like
That
he
was
hears that.
clear with Bill
Yeah,
Burr, where it's
yeah,
like,
exactly.
we will never speak of this again.
But it was nice to see him kind of grin and take it throughout the night. And then yeah, I think, and then after Mulaney, I thought, well, one starting with Mulaney, it's a tough act to follow. The lineup as a whole for the special, I thought was fantastic.
Yeah,
But then
someone
having
referred to it as a murderer's row of
yeah,
comedians.
it really. I mean, Mulaney, then right to Will Ferrell was the next guest after that, and I thought having him out to do an over the top,
Of course.
escalation, kind of him escalating things to an insane point
You
was
told
great.
me you weren't going to accept this award.
uh,
I did
my
not say that.
I really enjoyed him. It was I know this is your night, but you look like an idiot right now. And that is to me like peak Will Ferrell
Oh, yeah.
tantrum. Yeah, and I think that's what Will Ferrell. I think that show for Will Ferrell for cast members of SNL having that like playground right there in 30 Rock for
Oh,
them.
God. Will Ferrell's Leprechaun.
Yeah, I was like scanning through the 10th anniversary special. I didn't get to watch all of it before this, but um, him coming out to apologize for doing that after they played the clip and then proceeding to do it again
Yes.
on stage, I thought was, and that's yeah, and I think Conan does a great job of like he knows the strengths of the comedians, the people that he has on his show. And I think it
Yes.
works both ways. I think he also knows when someone, if he can support someone if they don't have the strength, maybe an actor that's just there and doesn't, maybe have something that they can bring to the
Yeah.
table like a comedian can. But when he's with those other really funny people, I mean, he's just as entertained as the
Right.
audience, and he
He'll
wants to
lay
be the
back
yeah,
and
he
let
wants to be
them
the
do their
foil
thing.
to them, which I think is really great.
One thing about the Mark Twain award ceremony that I found was interesting was, of course, it was about Conan, but really it was about the different comedians showing off what made them special and why they're sort of in Conan's comedy entourage. Everyone was different. Some of the people who performed, I'm not a huge fan of, but you know, am
Uh,
familiar with their work. But this
yeah,
was them at their best doing what they do.
yeah, I was going to say, even if you're not a fan of every single person that got up on stage, I think for the most part you could see why
Yeah.
they were there for sure. Um, and it's a good representation of a lot of different types of comedians, lots of types of humor, and those different
Yes.
connections that he has. I thought Nikki, after Will Ferrell, Nikki Glazer coming out, and again, kind of echoing that. I mean, similar to like she mentioned her dad was
Yes.
watching Conan was like, you need to watch this. Like that's how many people
Yes.
had a parent that recognized, yeah, this is something my kid is gonna resonate, something that's gonna resonate with my kid's, comedic sensibility. And then
Yes.
I thought she did an awesome job with the interrupter. Like she just to me that
Yeah.
was yeah, really, and also I think she represents Conan having a good eye for like young and new talent. Like she was someone that came on his show as a stand-up, and I think he really gravitated towards her. Remember in one of their early podcast interviews, them kind of talking about that, and one how much that validated her work. Yeah, that was how
Yeah.
validating that was to her. And I think when we talk about even late night talk shows and kind of the legacy of Johnny Carson's Tonight Show and what that was for stand-up comedians, I don't think the Jay Leno Tonight Show was ever that, but I do think
Yes.
Conan,
No, it wasn't.
late night, and even then when Conan was on TBS, had a really unique place in the comedy world for stand-up comedians, kind of alternative comedy, and maybe people that weren't going to
Yes.
have success on the Tonight Show. So I thought she was a good kind of representation of that kind of early or 2000s, 2010s kind of comedy comedy world as well.
I also, you mentioned Nikki Glazer. I'm wondering where Amy Poehler was.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's a, I
I
mean, she
wonder
might
if
have had something personal where it's like, oh, I gotta go to a family wedding. But she it's one of those people where I'm like, in hindsight, I'm like, wait, she was Andy's little sister.
yeah, I wonder if like Will Ferrell just had the SNL cat like, major SNL cast member spot.
But John
Uh
Mulaney was the SNL
yeah.
writer.
Yeah,
So,
that's but I thought that was also just a good parallel like
oh,
and they
and then
mentioned that
Tracy Jordan, not Tracy Jordan, Tracy
Tracy Moore.
Morgan,
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's true. Um and I think that that speaks to
Sarah
talented
Silverman,
how many talent yeah, I guess not the only that SNL through line is going to be there throughout.
because he was a
Uh
writer. Yeah.
but I do think yeah, it would have been interesting to see Amy Poehler and some of those other folks who had, those recurring bits with him over the years. It was interesting. Um, I did hear, I think Amy Poehler spoke about that recently on one of her podcasts. Actually, I forget who she was talking to, um, but just how thankful like the improv
Yeah.
community was to have Conan's show in New York during that time and to be a place where just people could work. They were employing a lot of comedians in New York City at that time and giving them opportunities to get credits, which there really isn't a show like that right now. Like the other, I don't
No.
think the other late night shows, even Seth Meyers has kind of pivoted a little bit into hit, leaning into a little more political and less kind of sketch based, performance based uh,
That's not who
content
he
on the
is
show.
as a comedian anyway.
Yeah, it's totally a different skill set there for sure. So, um, yeah, but I thought and then you mentioned Bill Burr. Bill Burr came
Hmm.
on after Nikki Glazer, and I thought that he he
Yeah.
addressed head on how uncomfortable Conan would be with the whole
Yeah.
entire show and act. But I thought it was great to see someone like that be so sincere about his appreciation for Conan. I think maybe that's one of the big takeaways from the special. And when you look at Conan's career, like people seem to really like Conan
Right. But
across the industry. Um, the fact that he works with people, a lot of the same people for decades, I
yes.
think that speaks a lot to the type of just human he is and person he is. And I do like when you could be a fan of someone and at any moment be like, oh my God, are they going to be canceled? Is something going to come up? Are they actually a terrible person? I feel like Conan's one that you can get behind and feel pretty good about about your decision and not have to worry about any of that. So
Oh
I
yeah,
really
like that reminds me. I don't know if you watched Conan O'Brien Can't Stop. It's a really hard thing to watch. It was the documentary about
oh yeah yeah I love sorry I was conflating that with the most recent travel
Musco.
show
Yes.
Musco can't stop but yeah can't stop is um I actually it used to be on Amazon Prime and it's not there anymore so I wanted to try to give that a quick watch I just couldn't
I have it
track it
on
down.
DVD. I've watched the first half twice. I never made it through to the second half because it's a very hard watch. I also have issues with all the jump cuts.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that's a I mean take whole site that was one of the toughest parts of his
Career.
professional life for his career for sure, and I'd probably say just his life in general, and documenting all that I think was it is really fascinating to watch. I wish I rewatched it more recently, um, but that's actually I I did you happen to see that tour by any chance? Did you see him when he was
No,
doing
I
that tour?
didn't. But why I brought that up was there is a scene in that where he is talking to two Canadian fans who I don't know what exactly they were complaining about, but they were complaining about like paying for something, and clearly not the brightest, also kind of anti-Semitic, where they're like, I was Jewed out of this. And Conan's response is, I'm Jewish. We all know Conan's not Jewish. Conan O'Brien, the Catholic boy who
Yeah,
blushes.
but that's kind of a perfect response
Like, that's
to
who
get
he
someone
is.
to shut their mouth or at least think about what's coming out of their mouth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, well, that tour I did. I went and saw their show in Atlantic City. So they
Oh.
did one show at the Borgata.
Uh,
It was awesome. I remember being bummed though, like 2 days later when I saw all of the people that were at the New York shows the following like 2 days. And that's where all the celebrity, like all the
of
extra guests
course.
came through, like Vampire Weekend performed. I was pretty bummed. But I really enjoyed the show. And one, it was like him putting on a show.
Yes.
Um,
He did the
prior to,
stand-up comedian tour where he was presenting like these are stand-ups you should know, but this was his actual tour.
yeah, so it was like a good mix of some, sketches. Reggie Watts was there, which was awesome.
Yeah, Reggie
I
Watts
mean,
brought that up.
not to jump to his part, but I thought he was great on the special. But it was a lot of Conan just playing music with the band and wanting to perform, and you could tell he had a lot to like, a lot to burn off, a lot to get out of the system. And then
Yeah.
that's actually the second time I saw him was then when he was doing the Conan show. I think it was like 2010, maybe it was 2010 when he did the tour. I actually wrote it down somewhere. Um, but he took down the road, and I saw him do a series of shows up in New York City. So I was able to see him, and that was awesome too because you always see on on TV when
Yeah.
he's in one of those small theaters how loud and crazy it can get, and like
Yeah.
I don't know that the Conan fan base can deliver when it comes to live shows. So it was just great to be around that energy, which is a
Right.
entirely
But
unique energy compared to his maybe typical studio audience energy.
also Conan's fan base has changed over the years as his career has evolved because he was very much this cult thing at the beginning. And then with late night, more and more people were figuring it out, but it was mainly young people and still kind of like, oh, these are what the kids like, and still like very specific subset of the kids. Then NBC gave him The Tonight Show, which we all know what happened there. I did appreciate that no one mentioned Jay Leno or the Tonight Show fiasco during the
They
thing.
did. They did. Will
They
Ferrell had
did.
a really funny line, and he
Oh wait.
basically said that
Oh,
Jay
unless
Leno.
Jay Leno wants it. They
No,
did.
it
You're
was.
right.
He said, yeah, the Jay Leno show at 10 p.m. was just too damn popular. But he was talking about his short run at the Tonight Show. But that was, I think, the only time Jay Leno was specifically brought up. They did a
Mentioned,
pretty good job of not bringing up.
but it
Um,
was also like you're right. They did bring it up, but for me that was forgettable. Where it's like, yeah, they brought it up, but no
yeah,
one
well, they didn't make
cares
a
because
big.
it
Yeah,
worked
they didn't.
out.
Yeah, exactly. It was a passing joke. I think everyone got a good laugh out of it, and then yeah, they were able to keep it keep it moving. And I think
Oh,
to his credit,
John
they.
Mulaney also did with
Oh well,
the
yeah.
you got $45 million or 50 million. You are the richest underdog in this town.
Cynical, and then you got X million, yeah, $1 million. Um,
And Conan's like, yeah. In hindsight, not a great look, but yeah. Like, don't be cynical.
but
You have fifty
but
million dollars, dude.
but I will say that I think those remarks were very sincere. I think yeah, it's Maybe in hindsight, even just the sentimentality about the Tonight Show maybe seems a little silly, especially
I,
seeing everything that he
it
himself has
wasn't
been
at
able
the
to go on to.
time.
But at the time, I think it came from a really
It was,
sincere
yes.
place, and I think he has a genuine love for television and the medium itself, and especially the talk show and the late night
Hmm.
talk show. So I think that was very sincere at the time, um, and I think to his credit, it just shows it. It really did work out for the best. It sent him down a path that gave him. I mean, I don't know what it would be like if Conan was still hosting the Tonight Show or about to retire from from the
I
Tonight
think
Show.
he had more fun this way, and it was more fulfilling than it would have been otherwise. Because he may have just gone down as another late night talk show host in an era where talk shows were becoming increasingly irrelevant.
Yeah,
And now he's like this guy who has successfully reinvented his career. He has a podcast network. New generations are discovering him. The whole Team Coco thing, while it bugs me, did give him a whole new generation of fans.
what bugs you about Team Coco?
I guess because I'm kind of one of the original fans.
Oh,
You know
oh,
how it's like, punk
you
bands where it's
discovered the band first. I
yeah,
think we got to embrace the fact. Open the Conan tent as large as possible and welcome every. And that's from someone who I feel like I'm sure
yeah,
you experienced this trying to like when Conan got the Tonight Show. I remember talking to the at that time like parent yeah the generation or generation two above
yeah,
me, my parents, my in-laws, people where I was like trying to get them kind
yeah,
of excited the way I was about Conan, and there was like resistance to Conan. People,
yes.
I think, of a different generation, people maybe used to more of a Leno kind of presence in that role, were a little more Conan resistant. So as he gains that popularity, I say, yeah, bring them all in. But
I
I understand where you're coming from.
I th- I think my real issue is, to me it feels like his comedy has gotten more mainstream over the years.
That's
And I
fair.
don't know if it's because he's changed or just everyone who came after is influenced by him. And it could be a combination of the both. Of both. Because, as you get older, you change some things.
Yeah, it's
And
probably. I would think it's probably
yeah.
a combination of the two. I think some of the things that felt more cutting edge in 1993 to 2003 just feel less cutting edge because comedy has evolved so much.
But I
You know,
still
so
prefer Clutch Cargo to Conan O'Brien Must Go. I'm not saying that's a bad show, but it's more like everyone around the world knows who he is, so he's visiting fans rather than just messing with random people on the street.
yeah, that's fair. And I think it's interesting hearing him talk a little bit. Actually, what was I listening to?
So I think it's more I like when it was like, oh, he's the underdog and he's scrappy. And he used to talk about how it would bother him that when they were promoting the late night lineup on NBC, it would be like, Jay Leno has Matthew Perry and Tom Cruise and Madonna on tonight. And stay tuned for Conan O'Brien at 12:35. And it's just Conan like holding a sign, which I thought was brilliant, but it bugged Conan because it's like he was an afterthought. But I'm like, that's kind of what made it cool, where they were using these like 5 seconds to be creative.
yeah. No, it's interesting. And even you know, saying that about the difference in maybe some of that humor and the like Conan Must Go. The thing I was thinking of, I was listening to a podcast with him and Pete Holmes, and it was from about 5 years ago. It was actually like filmed
Yeah.
early during the pandemic, which is a whole
And
other
Pete
thing.
Holmes had a talk show for
Yeah, and he was
a
someone
minute.
who, yeah, and I think he was from that someone who wouldn't have had a talk show if it wasn't for Conan O'Brien. Like that
No.
was someone that he recognized, this something special in, but he was asking him what like re-energizes him, what gives him fuel. He'd probably phrase it in a Pete Holmes way, like spiritual fuel or something. But
Yeah.
um, when when Conan's response, and he said, "There's not really one definitive answer," but he said a lot of times, when he's at his best and his happiest, and like the best part of his day is typically something that happened in a writer's room, just like goofing
Yes.
around, something interacting with someone at in the office, like in the hallway, or a complete stranger. And like so,
Yeah.
to me, it's like, of course, he found a way to travel and talk to complete strangers and like
Of
get
course.
that because it does seem to energize him in a way that maybe sitting behind the desk wouldn't have
Right. And
for decades.
this may be where knowing a lot about TV may be working against me, where like he goes and everyone has a parasocial relationship with him. So it's like, I have known you
Mm-hmm.
for 30 years. And he's like, hi,
Yeah.
I'm Conan O'Brien. Because, he's introducing himself like a normal person.
Yeah. Uh,
And the dynamic is skewed and can be a little uncomfortable. Because he
it,
rolls with it, but it's like, this isn't organic comedy because now the
it is a
fans
little,
are on.
yeah, that's fair. That is a different dynamic. Like even visiting and interacting with people who do know him in a way where before it was, who is this strange
I mean, we
tall
don't
man?
think of the late night shows this way, but it used to be the joke where, Johnny Carson's the only man allowed in my bedroom besides my husband.
Well, that yeah, it isn't. You know what? And maybe it's a good segue into the because well, one of the I thought Andy Richter introducing Paul Rudd on the special was a good way
Yes.
just to like reference the just what could happen on that show, the recurring bits, Paul Rudd showing that clip
Mac
and
and me.
Mac and
You
me and it,
knew we were going to get Walker, Texas Ranger,
yeah, what you
the
did,
AIDS clip, and
a
Mac and
classic.
me.
Um, and I did we talked a little bit before this started. I thought when I first watched it, I kind of wanted more of Andy. And then I did find out there's a good podcast with Conan and Mike Sweeney, one of his longtime writers, where they
Yeah.
talk about the special. But they actually released the podcast in April, a month before the special aired. So they
Yeah.
didn't get into specifics, but they did talk a little bit about the dinner the night before. So there was a lot of people from the Kennedy Center and then other like celebrity guests there. Mike Sweeney emceed that dinner, but it sounds like Andy spoke at that a little more in depth. Sona spoke, so it sounds like more of those long time Conan
Yeah.
like direct employees and connections kind of had a moment to speak there too. Um,
Yeah. I mean Andy had to speak, but I didn't. It was kind of a low point for me, but I don't love Andy to begin with. I started watching Conan after Andy had already left.
okay,
And those 5 years are like my favorite, where he was playing off of Max rather than Andy. So seeing Max behind the drums and it was the Max Weinberg 7, I'm just like, this
yeah,
feels right. No offense towards James Wormworth, but it's Max's band.
yeah. I did. Well, it was funny. I was thinking of what were some of those recurring things that stand out um, from early on, or things that I could remember seeing, maybe like high school,
Hmm.
and the like where Max would say something, they just stand that he would say, yeah, they'd ask him a question and he'd answer, and they would change the stamp, but it would be a big red stamp on
Yeah,
Max's
it
face. It would
was
just say
usually the ass
ass.
stamp.
Yeah,
Yeah.
ass stamp. Um, but yeah, what were some of the recurring bits from that period that you remember or that really stood out to you?
I mean, there was vomiting Kermit a lot during that. There was the weird obsession with, it was like a slug costume that they spent $20,000 on for one bit. And then they're like, we have to figure out ways to recycle it. So it became a croissant, and they were just doing the math each time it appeared, how much each appearance would now
Oh,
cost.
that's fun.
There was the cactus playing We Didn't Start the Fire on the flute.
Okay. Yeah.
FedEx Pope is always great. Max that was also when they started screwing with La Bamba.
Yeah. La
And
Bamba being
Mike
the butt of a joke is always a win.
and Mike Merritt being just like these people are so white.
Yeah, I think um yeah, I was sorry, I was trying to think of things that like stood out, and I mentioned a little bit like for me, sometimes like the appeal of even like, wanting to watch any talk show at like that age being like
Yeah.
just like just into all things kind of pop culture is like who are they get like what guests did he have on, and I think it was always nice that he was able to get people, even maybe people you wouldn't think would be in on the joke, to
Mhm.
like so, whether it's Martha Stewart, which it turns out Martha Stewart would have a great sense of humor.
There was some sexual tension there.
Yeah, it remained for decades, it seemed.
And my favorite is a Halloween segment where somehow like bobbing for apples got involved. So
Oh, I
like
think I
Conan's
remember that one.
hands are tied behind his back,
Uh-huh.
and it just gets a little too hot for TV.
Yeah, but I think those are the types of things that like make that stand out because not everyone would have the comic instinct. There was a funny clip on the 10th anniversary special where he had Halle Berry on, and she mentioned that she was like with Regis earlier in the day, like she was on Regis and Kelly,
Mhm.
and Conan was like,
Yeah.
"You were with Regis earlier," and like, "Get out!" And then like she went along with it, and like she got up and
Yeah.
started to leave, and Conan literally springs out of his chair behind the desk and crawls across the other couches to like try to chase her. And I'm just like, yeah, that was not scripted, but that was the perfect instinct,
She
for
she
sure.
got it. She
Yeah,
understood.
everyone understood, and even like I used to like the celebrity secrets, like where they would just have
Oh,
them say
yes.
the most ridiculous thing.
Secrets.
Yeah. Um,
David Bowie, Tom Hanks.
and that was another. I mean, and
I
I
think
think that
Alanis Morissette was one of them. Because for
I'm
some
sure.
reason, I remember a bit about her saying, like, I knew it wasn't really ironic.
Yeah, there was on the 10th anniversary special. I know they showed like a Gwyneth Paltrow one and maybe like a Snoop Dogg one, but yeah, I mean they were able to kind of mine that and so many other things in so many different ways and get kind of
Oh, and
subvert your
stalking
expectation.
blocking.
Um,
The,
did
the
you
German craze.
um, on the special? What did you think of Kumail Nanjiani's Twain talk
Oh,
when he?
that was great. I loved that he shifted it from, like, oh, I love you, Conan, to, like, let's get, like,
Well,
very analytical about what is going on here.
yeah, I think trying to analytically or like to really quantify does Conan deserve the award, and that first bit of about the number of Simpsons episodes he wrote,
Right,
I
Charles
thought,
Manson is a bigger part of the Beach Boys than Conan
yeah,
O'Brien is of The Simpsons.
yeah, and I think Kumail's an interesting person too. Well, one, I liked his perspective as far as I was an
His
immigrant
intro. Yeah.
that came to America for college in 1996, and the first thing I got on TV was the masturbating bear. I think
And
it's
I'm
pretty
going to like it
fantastic.
here.
Yeah, I'm gonna like it here. Um, but even his history, like he has such a unique history too, as far as him having to cancel his Conan appearance last minute, and that led to Sona jumping on and being interviewed. That
I
was
don't
oh yeah, so
know
that was
about
during
that.
that was during the TBS run. He was supposed to, be the guest on the show, and it must have been hours before or very shortly before they
Hmm.
found out he wasn't going to be able to make it. I forget what the exact, it was probably some type of, filming scheduling conflict. But then they just
Why do
went to,
I'm vaguely remembering it might have something to do with a plane not arriving in time.
could have been, I don't remember the specifics, but I just know they went to Sona and they were like, do you want to be, want to be the guest? And she jumped in like a pro.
Yeah.
Um, and it was interesting some of the things I was listening to leading up to our conversation, especially around like those people that he keeps around him. And it
Yeah.
was interesting to hear him talk about Sona and Andy specifically, and describing them in very similar ways. And that like Sona's always Sona. She doesn't like
No.
pretend to be something else. Like she's very much herself. And he said, and that was a great thing about Andy. Like Andy, an hour before the show and during the show, you were getting the same
Andy.
person, kind of like unfazed by what was whatever else was going on. Um,
Right. And I feel like with Conan, while he's always the same person, like you can tell when he's on and when he's not because his poor children sitting next to him, you can see that Beckett is just sort of like, I, I'm here to support my dad. This is his thing. And then Nev, obviously I don't know them, but she seemed a lot like her mom.
yeah, I mean it's interesting over the years, talk about those like parasocial relationships that you can get with, a talk
Right.
show host, but I think then him becoming a podcast host, that's an interesting dynamic too, because you
And
hear
Liza
him talk a little,
Powell also has a podcast, and you
yeah,
know her a little bit too. So it's like, oh, like okay, it makes sense. Like the laugh
yeah, and you know
with
what? It's
Nev is the same.
I always think it's interesting when he says like his kids don't get him and they're just they still don't get it and he like seems to appreciate that, but it is interesting too when he talks about his relationship with his son specifically. They're often bonding over comedy. It sounds like yeah, I've when he's had guests on, he's talked about Arrested Development being a show that they watch with each other, and
Oh,
it's
okay.
yeah, so it's interesting. It's interesting that comedy seems to be a part of that relationship, but maybe just not necessarily his his comedy.
Which
But
I
yeah,
feel like would be a weird thing to be like, Dad, you're hilarious. Like, you
yeah,
know, like every
yeah.
kid sort of like, okay.
Ain't
Like
that the truth? Yeah,
if
that's the
Conan
truth.
was a mechanic, you wouldn't expect Becca to be like, I love that work you did on that engine.
Yeah, no, I think that's a normal, maybe kind of children and parent dynamic there. But it has been. I've enjoyed getting a little bit more of Conan kind of opening up about
Yeah.
his yeah, and even him having Liza on the podcast when she was launching hers, and like being able to experience that
Yeah.
dynamic is has been interesting.
Right. And then there's the two of them falling in love on camera.
Yeah, and to be able to have that as a relic of their, not many people have a video footage of their first encounter. That's for sure.
Yeah, and you can see he was off his game the entire time, and the camera crew was just screwing with him, and they put music in the background. And talking about Conan's association with music, I found it interesting that instead of playing the themes to one of his late night shows, they chose Jump, Drive, and Whale,
Yeah, yeah. What did you?
which seemed like
No,
an
go ahead.
odd choice for them to make. I understood it because I know Conan's a big rockabilly guy, swing guy, huge fan of Brian Setzer. Brian Setzer covered the Louis Primo orchestra version of it. So I got it, but I'm like, that is a weirdly like specific and seems like personal thing to Conan that not a lot of people watching this would get.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't think it even completely registered for me that that's what was playing, but at the same time, I think I was like, oh, this feels like what should be playing, and probably a song I've heard Conan perform, like or played at a live Conan show or
Maybe, yes.
something like that. So, but yeah, the musicality and that being, and I thought that was another thing even in looking back at his first episode is like even from the beginning, music was an important, or like those early episodes. It seemed like music was always an important part of the show, whether it was the band, or he seemed yeah, genuinely kind of interested in the musicians and musical acts that he was, bringing onto the show as well.
Right, and they ended with the big musical performance and all of the Mark Twains.
Yeah, which and that's a good, I think, a good synergy kind of between him and Adam Sandler, who seem to have a good like actual friendship.
Yes.
Um, which again through his podcast, even knowing like they're neighbors essentially. I think they live
Hmm.
down the street from each other
Yeah, because it
and
seemed like he knew the kids as
yeah.
well. Like the families knew each other. It
Yeah, he was
wasn't
giving
just
off
like,
real uncle vibes.
I mean, he always does.
Yeah, well, he kind of is
It's
everyone's
one of
uncle.
those things where at this point you're like, yeah, Adam Sandler's just making movies to get free vacations, and you know what? Good for him.
Well, I'll be sitting down in front of Netflix to watch Happy Gilmore 2 later this summer. I'm optimistic it won't be a disappointment. But I think Adam Sandler's also like you mentioned Juvenile earlier.
Yeah.
I I there was parts of watching this that made me feel like when I watched Adam Sandler's most recent special. He has a special on Netflix, and
Yes.
it's like some of these things are they feel like what we heard, and the songs Adam Sandler was singing in the '90s, but it
Right.
in a
The
good like
the
yeah.
Conan Sandman
Yeah,
bit.
that was a very juvenile, silly bit. But only
Yes.
I feel like only Adam Sandler could have done that. No one else that went up there
Yes.
could have done that, and I think pulled it off. Um,
Right, because Conan's just like, what?
but I had like a big smile on my face and a lot, that previous that Adam Sandler thing, just feeling like, oh, this makes me feel like what I felt discovering him as a kid.
Right,
And a
and
lot of watching the Twain special was it made you realize like why you kind of fell in
mhm,
love with Conan
yes.
as a kid and a teenager. So yeah,
And
enjoyed that.
I think that a lot of the performances that I wouldn't have liked or wouldn't have loved ordinarily, watching Conan's reaction, it's like he is having the time of his life.
Yeah,
He's really uncomfortable with the sentimentality. But the fact that it's like, okay, I have to say nice things about you and then I'm going to roast you. It was
yeah.
basically a roast.
Well, you know what? I had that roast thought too because um I don't know. I'm hit or miss on roasts in general.
I don't
And I
like Jeffrey Ross, the old Dean Martin ones. I was talking about Bob Newhart the other day on the past episode of GFib, and we're talking about like it was Don Knotts, not Don Knotts. I think Don Knotts might have been on the dais. I'm not sure. But Don Rickles and Bob Newhart, who he'll say like slight jabs, but he's not the kind where he'll get up and like say offensive things about you
yeah.
because it amuses him. So that was very much like I'm friends with him and I need better friends.
Well, what I liked about this was, yeah, there were jabs at him, but it wasn't, you didn't have to go through the everyone needs to roast like the whole dais.
No,
There wasn't that dynamic. And I also thought it
no.
was nice having Triumph as the MC to do like
Yes.
just like one sentence little jabs at the performer as they were
Right.
coming out.
It
Like that's how
wasn't a
you were getting
roast,
your mini roast.
but it had that flavoring
Yeah,
because it wouldn't have been a Conan thing if it wasn't like Here's a mild insult. I mean, Sarah Silverman's whole thing probably was the most, where it's like, your mouth looks like a vagina. And it's
That
like,
that was great
okay.
though.
I'm
The
like,
fact that
okay.
she had all those people taking that out and putting that between their legs, and
The
then
fact
they
that his mouth got censored.
it's really funny. And then when you see it, you're like, well, I guess NBC standards and
It was
practices, maybe they had it.
TBS.
Maybe oh, was it TBS at that point? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, they might have made the right call there, but it was really funny it was really funny to see. And she was able to call out the person who had it sideways, which I thought was a very funny. And I think Silverman kind of and something we didn't really talk about as far as the special goes, but I
Yep.
think they did a really good job of kind of addressing the context in like the political context in which
Yes.
the the ceremony was being held without we earlier we talked about not saying the Leno, but I thought they did a really good job of keeping Trump's name out of it for the most part. There
Right.
was jabs at the administration in general and things that were happening. A lot of like someone I forget Letterman might have said this is the funniest meeting of the resistance to ever to ever be televised or that to ever happen. Sarah
Yeah, that was
Silverman.
in the part of the intro that I did not go through.
Okay,
I had, yeah, today we're discussing Conan O'Brien, the Kennedy Center Mark Twain Prize for American Humor, or as David Letterman called it, the most entertaining gathering of the
there,
resistance
there,
ever.
exactly. And I think, but I think that speaks to Conan himself. Like, and
Yeah.
then in that podcast I mentioned with him and Mike Sweeney, they talked about like, was there ever a question of whether or not they were going to do it? And they said that it was never a question for them. They're like, unless someone, the only thing that
Yeah.
would have kept them from doing it was if the Kennedy Center came in and said, we're not going to, we're not going to do it, or we're not going to host it anymore. And I think Conan, in his comedy over the
Yeah.
years, I think does a good job of I think addressing politics in a way that all late night hosts were doing, during his time. But
Right.
even more recently, I think he's like um, more uh, more nuanced in his takes and like is more interested in
Yes.
like the greater kind of historical context and I think his remarks then and using Mark Twain as his and
Yes.
the way to make his point was really smart, which is not surprising because he's an extremely intelligent person. And
Yes.
I think it
He
made
went
it
to
resonate.
Harvard. Did you know
Did
that?
he? I had no idea. Uh, I do kind of like how seemingly not embarrassed, but how much he just hates that when people bring up Harvard, not
Yeah.
seemingly not wanting to acknowledge it. Um,
Right. Like his standard line was, yeah, I went to Harvard driving school.
and that was funny. That was actually a funny bit too with Fred Armisen and the Harvard being like the head of admission, the dean of admissions over at Harvard.
Yeah,
I
I'm
think I just
sure
like whenever
he's
Fred
holding
Armisen
up our
shows up.
reputation. And
And
then
I
it's just Conan doing ridiculous things. It's like, but he's a Harvard man.
well
More
that and that
ridiculous things.
yeah, and there was a lot of versions of that joke even to start the show. The very serious voiceover, the about the prestigious award,
Yes.
and then cut to masturbating bear. I was like, yeah,
That's
this is
Conan.
yeah, perfect.
And the most direct about the whole thing and the change in the Kennedy Center and the atmosphere there was probably Stephen Colbert's intro, where it's like, he didn't get the Mark Twain Award before the 2024 election, and now he never will.
Yeah, and those are good. I think those are good ways to address, you know, the big dumb elephant in the room.
Because
Um,
Stephen Colbert is the most political of the major late night comics. You know where David Letterman stands, you know where Conan stands. Um, Seth Meyers, you know where he stands too.
I think Seth Meyers and
But
Stephen Colbert are probably close. And I mean,
yeah,
and that's because Seth Meyers, I think, just over the years with his closer look, like
yeah,
he kind of it does, John Oliver light, weekly. It seems.
Right. I mean, we
But
do have
yeah,
John Oliver and The Daily Show crew, but they're almost a different genre of talk show.
yeah. No, I totally agree. What did you think of Colbert and Sean Evans with the, doing like kind of recreating the hot ones? I had mixed feelings my first
I
time
did,
watching it because Conan's performance itself was so good.
yeah,
Um, but then after a rewatch, I was like, you know what? It actually went by a little quicker than like I thought it did after for my first watch. Um, and a lot of what he says that through tears and the anguish of it, I
right,
think was really good. The one thing I liked is uh, he said when he's on a roll, there's nothing better, and when he's not, he won't stop until he finds a roll. And I feel like
right.
that seems to be Conan in a nutshell.
I also don't see how Stephen Colbert could have done his bit any other way after watching it twice. Because while I don't love that they were leaning into the hot ones bit, I don't like Stephen Colbert. It's like we're gonna like recreate this, but it's gonna be worse.
Yeah, it's a tough. Well, and
But
to
that
that,
was the entire gag. Was
yeah,
like
yeah, and he even
it's worse
acknowledged it
than
up
the
front.
original. Yeah,
Yeah, up front, it was like go watch Conan do this. And
yeah,
I mean, and to Conan's credit, that was a fantastic interview and
right.
just
And
unhinged Conan experience.
I think it's sort of like I like when people are like, "We're gonna do this thing, but it's gonna suck," and it's like it's not actually going to be awful,
Yeah,
but you're setting the bar low so
yeah.
that you can
Sometimes
actually go over it rather than be like, "This next comedian is hilarious," and you're like, "Why is he telling knock knock jokes?"
yeah, there's some level setting in the setup. What did Were there any other things? I mean, I was thinking about like going through it. Um, I thought Tracy Morgan was probably the most sincere of all the like there
Yes.
less jokes from him, but I think there is a really sincere appreciation and again, he's like one of those people who worked in the same building as Conan for a period of
Right, and
time.
Tracy Morgan's been through a lot.
Yeah. So I think my note when I was watching was just love and respect. It just seemed very genuine from them. And I believe them both, like him saying they both had dreams of being on TV and like maybe that
Yeah.
shared. And the one thing that did stand out is he said that he was a guest over 50 times. I didn't fact check it. I took his word, but that just seemed like a really high number of appearances.
I can believe that because Tracy Morgan's been around for a while. If he was on 2, 3 times a year, which definitely is possible, he could easily have
Yeah, I guess you
knocked
could
that up.
easily get
And you
there.
wouldn't even notice it because, okay, like they're friends, he's on twice a year.
Yeah.
There's 50 shows, 200 shows a year. It's not like, why is this guy always on? It's like, oh, he's making another appearance.
Are there any celebrities or just guests in general that you would look forward to most or whose appearances you remember most fondly?
Uh, I remember mm, probably
Uh,
Martha Stewart is the
yeah.
one. I remember those that I didn't really like. Like I don't like Will Ferrell. Granted, he seems like a cool guy. I love him when he's not doing his shtick, but
Okay.
his shtick is just not for
Not your
me.
thing. That's fair.
But it's like, okay, I get it. Like after I haven't seen it yet, but after the Harper and Will and listening to him talk about it, I'm like, this is a good guy.
Oh yeah, that I highly recommend that documentary. It's really, really good. And I think it does validate him as a good person, regardless of how you feel about his comedy over the years. I'm biased. I'm a big Will Ferrell fan. I
Right.
will
And
give him a lot of leeway. But I enjoy their dynamic. It's funny, like I like that people felt like they could go on his show and like just try
Yes.
bizarre things. Like this is more recent, but the comedian Adam Pally, he was on the show Happy Endings, and
Okay.
but he would go on the TBS show and he would like go in like a different costume every time. So like he came
Oh,
out as like
yes.
Jim Carrey as the mask, and like I
Was
like that.
he Abraham Lincoln one time?
Yeah, I think yeah, I believe so. So there people that could the fact that even like a younger comedian could feel um like the safety of Conan to like go on that show and take like a big swing and try stuff like that. I really enjoyed in some of the clip packages, and then I guess like the fact that people like Tom Hanks, like your America's favorite actor, but people like that with that type of reputation would like want to get silly with Conan.
Yes.
Even like as
And
far back, I really enjoy those types of appearances too. When you get like someone, I feel like Conan was also good with like the Harrison Fords of the world, someone that has like one very like forward facing persona
yes.
and kind of being able to chisel away at that or get them
Yeah, there was
to
one interview where Harrison Ford just seemed high throughout the whole thing.
yeah, that sounds right. I don't know if it probably wasn't. It was probably just yeah.
But his
And
aloofness came
yeah, a
across
little
as
aloof.
like,
Yeah.
are you
And I'm sure Conan
somewhere
fed off of
else?
that. I'm sure Conan fed off that in a way. Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
and that's I think a strength of Conan was is being able to pull that out of his his guests. Um, I know other things that that I really um the one thing the Oscars like writers room sketch, I
Yeah.
just enjoyed that it turned like the final turn at the end of it
Yeah.
when they call him
Help us.
yeah, or and then they just call him an F and A hole
Yeah.
to once he leaves. That made me think of like one of my favorite remotes is when he's just walking around the office in the Conan, like doing
Hmm.
um, or he's doing performance reviews in his office. This is part of the I believe the TBS
Yeah.
show. Um, but again, it feels like Conan and working with Conan is definitely an experience, definitely something where you have to be maybe be on your toes in a way that you wouldn't have to be
I
with other.
I
Yeah, go
also
ahead.
think that's where the Letterman influence comes in a bit because Letterman also like he feeds off of everyone thinking he's an asshole and like the Late Show had the FU guy where like the entire bit was the guy would come on and just scream FU at everyone and it would be censored and then just walk off. And that's Letterman, but Conan would do that, could do something like that, but it would be like the FedEx Pope or someone
Yeah,
dressed in some ridiculous costume.
yeah. I used to like the he would like the obscure like the mascots like that. They just
Oh, the college
the
mascots.
college mascots. Yeah. Um.
Yes.
Well, you mentioned Letterman. So, what did you
Hmm.
think of kind of Letterman being the one to introduce introduce him and present the award to him.
I it's one of those things where Letterman's whole speech I didn't think was that strong, but Letterman was in a weird position of he knows how much he means to everyone in that room. He's also
Yeah.
not comfortable about it, which is probably why he focused so much on what he could be doing back in Indiana.
Yeah. Yeah. That was
And
funny.
he then goes into Conan and how much he supported Conan and he's glad. And then he introduces Conan. And while I would have loved to see Letterman do more, I don't think the show was the venue for that because he would be the guy. Like, Conan,
Yeah.
this is why you're receiving the award. It was a little weird seeing him introduce the masturbating bear, the FedEx Pope, Jordan Schlansky, two worlds colliding that are next to each other but don't usually commingle.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I thought full circle moment, and Conan then like a great thing for Conan to build off of. I mean, he shares that anecdote about
Yeah.
not getting a job on, with Letterman on late night, but
Yeah.
then, you know,
And Letterman's already said, well, that was our loss.
yeah. And I'm sure that alone is enough, was probably enough for Conan, and then to be able
Yeah.
to get this probably made it all the better.
Yeah. People, and I don't think this is necessarily the case knowing what I know about Letterman, but people were like, it looks like Letterman and Conan have become closer over the years. I don't know how true that is because I don't think Letterman gets super close to anyone, but that was kind of nice that at least gave the appearance of it.
There definitely seems to be very genuine mutual
Admiration.
admiration. Yeah,
Yeah.
for
I
sure.
would go more towards that. Like, I don't think they're hitting the ski slopes like Stephen Colbert has done with Conan when they both found their families on vacation in the same place at the same time and they're like, let's go skiing.
But they definitely, I mean, they did. Um, I'm trying to think. Did Conan do Letterman's Netflix show?
No.
I know. Letterman was on the podcast with Conan. I just didn't know if they, but they
No,
definitely been able
Conan
to kind
has
of have.
not. No, he hasn't.
Okay.
Which I'm wondering if that's coming up. I mean, Letterman just makes things whenever he wants at this
Yeah.
point. And I think that would be interesting because there's a lot of ground to cover. I'm not sure that's something that Letterman would want to dive into. He may not feel it's necessary since we literally have thousands of hours of Conan on his podcast to watch.
Yeah. Um, what did you think of then you know, the the song with Sandler and all the Twains, and then the Will Forte of it all
Yeah,
at
that's
the
when
end.
you kind of lose me. I don't love Will Forte. I'm just like, this is when Conan, like, this is Conan, but this is when Conan loses me.
So you were not a fan of like Will Forte as Ted Turner when they were on TBS?
No, I'm like,
Uh,
okay, this was funny the first time. This is funny for about 5 seconds. And it's one of those things that didn't get funny again for me. Like, I
Fair
do like
enough.
when things are start like it's funny, then it just
That's
gets
not funny,
unfunny, and then
and
it
then
goes on for way too long, and then you're like,
it
this
brings
is
it back.
hilarious. But this was not one of those things for me.
The part of me appreciated that even as Twain, and I don't think it was intentional, but the pure amount of energy that Forte brings to these performances. It's seemingly
Mm-hmm.
his mustache is always about to fall off of his face. There's funny moments when him as Ted Turner, where I think Conan even like intervenes and tries to put the mustache back on. Um,
Yeah, I wonder if he's
I get,
sweating or not using the right
well,
glue or.
I, I think we're a little different on our forte. Did you ever watch Last Man on Earth? Did you ever watch that
No.
series? It was on Fox. That might make you a Forte believer, or it might just
Okay.
make you run completely in the opposite direction. But um, it's a lot of Forte. It's very funny, pretty cringy at moments, but a very good series. But
Okay.
that's just me making my plea for and really anyone to watch that show. But yeah, and
Well,
then
I
I
wasn't
guess
a Bill Hader fan until I watched Barry.
okay, yeah. Well, Barry's so good.
Yes, he is.
Um, yeah. Well, and I think and it's just not that this is a Will Forte podcast, but I think that show is a similar like it gives you a different side of maybe what you would have gotten from just SNL performances and some of his bigger like broader comedy.
Is our
Uh,
next episode going to be on Will Forte? Is
I
this
I would gladly just talk about uh, like 2010s SNL cast members for a full podcast. That's for sure.
I think
Uh,
you're a bigger. I think everyone's a bigger SNL fan than I am,
I
which is
gather I did.
weird.
Yeah, I listened a little bit to one of the podcasts you did around the SNL 50th,
Right. I'm
and
like,
I was
it's
like, I was in I was in heaven for those 2 weeks in February with the amount of SNL content. The Lorne book came out. Like yeah, I was eating it all up. But
And I was one of those people where it's like, I like SNL as an institution, but great. Like, more stuff I have to watch because of what I do, where it's like, what, you're not
yeah,
watching the SNL 50 stuff? It's like, yeah, okay.
that's fair. If it's forced, it can be. I think that's a good like. If you're not feeling SNL and you're forced to watch 90 minutes or however many minutes of an episode, it can
Five
be.
hours of SNL 50 stuff. 5 hours. Um, but I understand it. It obviously has been a huge influence in the American comedy scene over the last 50 years. It's the difference between understanding something and actually loving something or
Yeah.
liking something. And for me, SNL has been mostly miss. Like, there are few hits. I'm also not a sketch comedy person. Like, there are sketch comedy shows that I like. I like Kids in the Hall. I like Fry and Laurie. Not a Monty Python fan, which insert gasps here.
Yeah, but I mean, comedy. I think that's the nice thing about comedy, though. Like, comedy is a subjective medium. It's not going to be for like
No.
everything is going to be for everything for everyone, and I think that's what's kind of great about it is
Right, and I
you can find your own thing. Um, yeah, and I think SNL is a unique thing too, where it's like SNL knows that all of it isn't great. It's a number, SNL is a
it's
numbers game. I
live.
think
You go
over
on not because it's ready, but because it's 11:30.
exactly. I have a question for you, like more so as far as the special as a piece of television or at least streaming content. What is television anymore anyway?
Yeah.
But what I mean, would you like to see Netflix, assuming the award is given out, continues to be given out annually, and there is a ceremony? Do you think would you like to see Netflix do this every year? It seems like there's a real commitment to comedy at Netflix.
That would be awesome, but I have a feeling that if there is a next year, it's going to be someone like Joe Rogan.
Oh
Or
no.
someone where you're like, no.
Yeah, I guess it'll be a test to see. It would be a shame. I
Whereas
think they said
previous
26
winners,
years. Um, yeah, and that's the other thing. How familiar were you with the ceremony coming into this? Like, I myself was trying to think. I don't know if I've definitely seen some on PBS. I don't know if I watched one as intently or completely, maybe as this one, but I've
I
definitely
haven't
seen bits and
seen
pieces.
I haven't seen any of the Mark Twain award. I've seen
Okay.
bits and pieces of Kennedy Center honors.
Okay.
Um, but I don't pay too much attention to the Kennedy Center unless it's some huge deal like this.
Fair enough.
And
I think that's a good point for, fingers crossed we're not awarding Joe Rogan, but um, hopefully then if it can continue as is, uh, to have it on a platform like Netflix, because I think what you said, probably more people have watched this than any other Kennedy Center honors or Mark Twain award ceremony. I would really like to see more like this. And maybe
okay.
a adjacent question, but related to late night and um, Netflix
I think
and
you're
our
now
first
hosting
guest.
this podcast.
I'm happy to. I'm glad you could let me take the final minutes. But did you watch John Mulaney's show on Netflix? And do you think they're like? Well, one,
I
have you
have
watched any of it?
not. I'm not a
Okay.
John Mulaney fan either. I
Okay.
have been getting a little more into John Mulaney. It's the number of comedy things that I find myself saying I am not a fan to. I'm just like and again, it may be studying it so much where I'm like, that is the structure of a joke. Yes, that is a joke. I may not find it funny, but that is a joke. Someone's going to find it
You
funny.
you find yourself nodding, more just recognizing the form of it all, maybe a little bit more. The
Yes.
interesting thing about the John Mulaney show is it is unlike any other late night show that I think, definitely any
I've
other broadcast.
I've heard he does some things that just confuse people, and I haven't seen it yet. Some of it sounds like a little bit like early Letterman. Letterman was still within the confines of NBC and
Mhm.
network television, so he couldn't go off the rails like John Mulaney has apparently done.
uh,
But he did things where it's like strap a camera on a monkey and let the monkey
yeah,
run around the set, where it's like
yeah,
that's clearly the origin of some of the John Mulaney weirder stuff.
yeah. It has like sometimes like a public access feel to it also. Chris Gethard, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but
Yeah,
uh,
I'm not
he,
super familiar, but I know the Chris Gethard
he's
show.
yeah, like his show. It might actually be that's maybe one of the best parallels to it, just as far as it feels like it's happening in a basement somewhere, not
Like
a
Comedy Bang
studio.
Bang.
Yeah, and a little bit, and that's I mean, again, like kind of thinking about Comedy Bang Bang, I think is a good overlap in like late period Conan and his comedy, I think, as far
Yeah.
as that like 2010s alternative comedy and a lot of those. If you were
Hmm.
listening to Comedy Bang Bang and watching the second act or you know, uh, the stand up performance on Conan, you probably knew those performers more than the average person, I think.
Yes, definitely. And I guess before we start closing things out,
Yeah.
the audience. Did you get a good look at who was in the audience? There were some people who I didn't know who probably just paid for tickets because the Kennedy Center is just a bunch of rich people watching famous people. But there were Sona was there, Jeff Ross, not to be confused with Jeffrey Ross, the
Yes.
Roastmaster
Yeah.
General, who
Yep.
yeah, producer
Producer
Jeff
Jeff
Ross.
Ross.
Then there was I did not initially recognize him because he was wearing glasses, but Lorne Michaels was there.
Oh, I didn't. Yeah, I didn't catch him. I'm actually curious any other people you caught because I didn't catch many people in the audience shots. Maybe I just didn't have an active eye out for anyone. Were there any other
I
big
don't
names that
know
didn't
if
perform?
I would have caught Lorne Michaels if I'm like, wait a minute. The lower half of his face is making a very Lorne Michaels expression,
Okay,
which I wouldn't have caught had SNL 50 not happened. And now I know
there you
way too much about Lorne Michaels'
go.
mannerisms because his glasses made him almost unrecognizable. But just it's like, oh, wait, he's the
Yeah,
only one who does that.
but I mean, it makes complete sense that he would be there.
And it was
Um,
during Tracy Morgan or
okay,
some
so
SNL thing
an
where
SL
it was
person where
like,
they cut.
oh, putting this together.
Yeah, no, I think that's if anything, I probably maybe would have expected some more celebrity faces or more recognizable cuts to celebrity faces kind of in the crowd. But
I
again,
think
I
they
think to your
tried to
point,
keep it to relevant people
yeah,
or
yeah,
people Conan fans would appreciate. Like Mike Sweeney was there, but Mike Sweeney was part of the Oscar group.
yeah, that was
Um,
I thought that was also a good
yeah.
way to incorporate a lot of his longtime writers into the show. I think everyone around that table was someone who's been, with him for
Yeah, it was mostly people who had some connection to Conan. It wasn't just random famous people.
yeah. I can't remember if I think I did mention the podcast, but the Inside Conan podcast that they started, I think it was like around 2018 or 2019 during the
Mm,
TBS run.
yeah.
Um, Mike Sweeney and Jesse Gaskell, the both two of the writers, they host that. I mean, it stopped. There aren't new episodes anymore, but that's a really great resource just for anyone that wants to do like a deeper dive into that period of Conan, but then they do a lot of retrospective interviews and things about the early days of late night.
Yeah,
So just anyone looking for additional reading, additional listening, that's a really good place to start.
yeah, I have not dived into that. I'm not a huge Team Coco podcast fan. I'll listen to it occasionally. I find Conan to be a visual comedian. I prefer watching clips on YouTube rather than
Gotcha.
watching, no, than listening in the car or if I'm walking or doing one of those things. I wish they
Yeah.
released the full videos
Full
online
video. Yeah. Well, it
because
seems
then I
like
would be watching more of it.
I wonder if he's a little resistant, a little resistant to that, in that he thought he moved away from making a television show, and now through the podcast, he's slowly everyone's inching back to basically their own televised, talk shows. Like every,
Right.
especially I feel like this past year, you've seen most podcasts or a lot of podcasts really embracing the audio and video, where they're pretty. They'll do some long form clips, but they won't. I don't think they've ever released a full episode as a video yet.
There might be one or
Yeah.
two. I think the one right after the Palisades fire
Okay.
was released in
So maybe
full,
some of the shorter ones. Got it.
but it's not a common occurrence. And
That's a good
it,
point though about Conan. Like the physicality of Conan, which I don't think we talked a lot about, but um, to me, that is one of the most memorable things about
yeah,
his run as a late night talk show host, in that the physicality that he would even bring to a monologue. I mean, everyone goes to the string dance, but like him
I hate the
leaping,
string dance.
him leaping out of frame, coming back
Yes.
in, like that is uniquely
Or
Conan, it seems.
the stairs or the I'm
Yes.
gonna go to hell when I die.
Yeah, and I think that physicality is yeah, it's something you don't get as much,
No.
for sure, not over a podcast. It was funny you were talking about, like, Johnny Carson being the only person allowed in the bedroom at
Yeah.
night, but um I I used to look up the videos when I first had our oldest child, the lullabies that Conan would do, because he like knew that there were parents up with, and it was
Yes.
something I couldn't appreciate, as a 20-year-old without a kid, but it was just one of those things that like randomly up late at night, like with a 5 month old, and I
Yes.
like actually found those, and I got such pleasure of listening to them, um, as a parent then, and
That's
just
another Conan's dark humor.
yeah,
It's just horrible videos of all this.
horrible,
Now
horrible
tell
video,
baby
yeah,
to go to sleep. Turn
yeah,
around.
yeah. So yeah, he's the best.
And is there anything else you want to say
I don't
before we close out?
just if to those listening, if you were a casual Conan fan, there's just so much Conan content at this point that I implore you to do a deep dive. Um,
Where would you recommend people start?
I mean, I really there's some good, even like good YouTube playlists out there. Like, so if you like his remotes, like him kind of out
Yeah.
in the real world, that's I think a good, especially a lot of what we spoke to about him just
Mm,
interacting with people, and kind of that spontaneous, smart, quick-witted
right.
humor.
Even when it's more constructed, like old timey baseball
Yeah,
or apple picking with Mr. T.
the
Um,
American Girl store one is, and then the podcast is nice at this point because even if there's a comedian or a actor, actress, just someone that you have an interest in, you could probably find a long form conversation with them and Conan, which is great.
Yeah.
I do think the podcast itself, like the dynamic between him and Sona and Matt Gurley, has really evolved a lot and can sometimes be the funniest part of those episodes. So yeah, I think YouTube is probably your best friend and like the Team Coco channels in that area. And then we mentioned it, but like that 10th anniversary special
Yeah.
for the late night show, that's on YouTube, easy to find. Um,
There is a corresponding Triumph special. If
yes,
you're a Triumph fan, great. If you're not a Triumph fan, you can kind of skip it, even though
yeah,
the infamous, famous Star Wars remote
yes, the Star
is
Wars
on
one
there.
is yeah. I enjoyed over the past week or so. I've reached out to like my roommate from college. We
Hmm.
bonded over Conan. That was one of like our first the things that we connected over.
Yeah.
Um, and I was just reaching out to people like that I knew were fans and trying to get an idea of like some of their entry points into it. But some of the remotes that were mentioned, the Triumph at the Phantom Menace Star Wars premiere,
Hmm.
um, Triumph at the Wieners Circle when they did a show in Chicago. It's Triumph and Jack McBrayer. It's the one of
Yes.
the most unhinged special Triumph remotes
And they
that I
made
can
that
remember
into
seeing.
an Adult Swim show that was not good.
Oh, really? Okay, I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, it was
Um,
a traditional sitcom, only Triumph is the sidekick.
okay, interesting. Well, um, but other remotes that you just mentioned too, that like the Apple picking at Mr. T.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it's just interesting hearing the things that like will grab someone and then make them want to dig deeper into to everything that's out there. But
Right, and
um,
there's so many facets where neither one of us can go, you're gonna love this for Conan, because we don't even agree on what our favorite parts about
yeah,
Conan
and,
are.
and I think that's what's great. I think that's kind of the great thing about it. I think you can find your unique Conan lane at this point.
Yes.
Um, yeah, regardless of kind of your preferred comedy taste.
Yeah, it's no longer chained, like John Mulaney said, where we're like all in this together, and it's like we're gonna say it's all great even when it's not, because we want to save his career, where
Mm.
Conan's doing pretty well at this point. We can
He's
all find what we prefer, whether that's the podcast or Conan O'Brien Must Go or old clips, Conan Classic.
yeah.
There's just so much out there to enjoy, whatever you're into. And until next time, I'm Allison Lips. Thank you for listening to Greetings from the Idiot Box. Thank you, Chris. Remember, television is a medium, neither neither rare nor well done. Bye.